Okay, bon matin tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone.
Happy last day, knock on wood, but I believe that we are on the precipice of rising for the summer, and this will be our last industry meeting. So I'll have a few things to say about that and what we have to look forward to in the fall toward the end of the meeting. Je vais juste commencer pour confirmer que tous les tests.
I can confirm that all audio tests have been done and confirmed.
House Father, Mr. Baines, Monsieur Saint-Marie, who are joining us virtually today. Colleagues, we have been undertaking, as you know, a study on fraud. Today will be the last hour that we've got dedicated to that study. Joining us from Google Canada is Jeanette Patel, who's the Director of Government Affairs and Public Policy for Canada. Ms. Patel, you'll have upwards of 5 minutes for your opening remarks, at which point there'll be a line of questioning from members of the recognized political parties around the table. With that, I'm going to turn the floor to you, and once your introductory remarks are completed, as I say, we'll go to our questions. Over to you, Ms. Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, for the opportunity to speak before you today. My name is Jeanette Patel. I'm the Director of Government Affairs and Public Policy for Google Canada. At Google, our mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And keeping our users safe is foundational to that mission. Financial fraud and scams exploit people and undermine the trust that is essential to the digital ecosystem. This society-wide challenge has grown in scale and complexity, with global fraud losses estimated at nearly $580 billion for 2025, according to the NASDAQ Global Financial Crime Report. And this is driven by sophisticated transnational criminal operations that combine online and offline methods. At Google, keeping our users and partners safe is our top priority. To tackle this global problem at scale, we've invested for over 2 decades in advanced technologies, robust policies, legal action, and expert teams dedicated to protecting the users of our products and services. Our interventions have significantly improved with our latest innovations in AI, specifically our Gemini-powered tools. While our teams have long used advanced AI to identify and stop scammers, Gemini takes that work even further. Our models analyze billions of signals, including account age, behavioral cues, and campaign patterns to stop threats before they reach people. Gemini's superior understanding of intent also allows us to spot malicious content and preemptively block it, even when it's designed to evade detection. And the impact speaks for itself. In 2025, Gemini-powered tools helped us catch over 99% of policy-violating ads before they ever served. We also apply rigorous anti-scam architecture at the device and ecosystem level on Android and Chrome. Android prevents over 10 billion malicious calls and messages every month, while Google Play Protect, which is active on 3 billion user devices, scans 200 billion apps daily. On YouTube, tools like AI likeness detection allow public figures to identify and remove deepfakes that misuse their identity for scams. And Gmail continues to block 99.9% of spam, malware, and dangerous links before they ever reach an inbox. Google Chrome Safe Browsing protects more than 5 billion devices worldwide by automatically warning users when they attempt to navigate to dangerous websites or download malicious files. Google makes safe browsing technology freely available to other browsers and internet companies. It is natively deployed in major competing browsers, such as Safari and Firefox, and operates across diverse operating systems, including iOS and Android. I'm proud to say that the core engineering and continuous development of the Google Safe Browsing system is driven directly by teams based in our Montreal office. That's Canadian talent, working directly on systems that keep billions of users safe around the world. And while these technical defenses are robust, no single entity can solve this alone. It's why we helped launch the Global Signals Exchange, expanding to over 1.2 billion shared signals among more than 300 organizations. And we actively provide dedicated reporting channels through our Priority Flagger program to Canadian financial institutions, law enforcement, and government organizations like the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre and Competition Bureau of Canada. When technical blocks are not enough, we take direct action through law enforcement cooperation and litigation. For example, in December 2025, Google joined a cross-sector intelligence sharing initiative led by the RCMP called Operation Maple Disruption, which led to thousands of disruptive actions taken against scammers. In the US, we've initiated proactive litigation to dismantle major criminal networks. This includes the Outsider and Lighthouse operation, which are both phishing as a service networks that distributed phishing kits to allow criminals to deploy massive fake text campaigns, as well as the Darkula Syndicate, which stole data from nearly 900,000 credit cards. Our legal action is designed to tackle this challenge at the source and dismantle the core infrastructure of these operations. Enfin, nous nous engageons à faire.
Finally, we are committed to promoting the independence of Canadians. We are proud to support the Canadian Anti-Fraud Coalition's Together Against Fraud campaign by providing financial support to amplify the awareness message. We are also developing workshops specifically for Canadian seniors to help them use AI tools to identify and avoid common online threats. We look forward to future opportunities to collaborate with members to raise public awareness in their communities. Google is committed to being a dedicated partner of the Government of Canada in tackling the challenge of financial fraud and deepfakes. Safe and trustworthy online environments do not happen by accident. They result from intentional design, rigorous management, and strong collaboration.
Looks to the future, we believe a national anti-fraud strategy should be built on three core principles: enabling information sharing across the ecosystem, incentivizing proactive community action by digital platforms, and investing in public education. We look forward to working with this committee to build a safer and more secure digital future for all Canadians. Merci.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Patel. All right, Madame Danto, the floor will be yours for 6 minutes to start us off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Patel, for being with us today. We greatly appreciate your feedback and also your overview of the work that Google is doing to combat frauds and scams. And I wanted to ask you about a class action lawsuit that has been filed resulting from an incident in, I believe it was 2005, as reported by La Presse, where a Quebec woman is alleging she lost more than $30,000 after, I believe, she clicked on a YouTube advertisement that allegedly had an AI-generated image of our Prime Minister, Mark Carney, advertising some digital currency investment scheme, where she ultimately lost, I believe it was upwards of $30,000, according to her claims. So I do appreciate that this matter is before the courts, and of course I'm not asking you to comment in that case specifically on the matters before the courts, but I do believe it raises a broader question that we've been seized with at this committee. Canadians are increasingly encountering AI-generated scams that impersonate public figures, impersonate like a CBC News article or the like. I know you're very familiar with this problem. What responsibility do you believe Google and other platforms, like I know you have YouTube under your purview, but also Meta and others, what responsibility do platforms have regarding scams like this that end up on your platforms? What responsibility do you have to Canadians in this regard?
Well, thank you for the question. And I think, you know, situations like this are obviously heartbreaking and really speak to the human cost that criminals are extracting in their targeting of vulnerable Canadians. And I think, you know, when I zoom out and I look at the role that Google plays here, it's one where we're playing a leadership role at multiple levels in hardening our systems through three pillars. So I'll just speak to those in a macro sense first. One is to build products that are safe by design, systems that can prevent, detect, and respond rapidly to these types of emerging threats. Working in partnership, because we need to no one can do this alone, and to build public education. But speaking specifically to, you know, to this type of issue that we saw, we respond rapidly to improve our ability for our systems to catch this. It's no surprise. I think criminals, we're in an adversarial space. Criminals constantly attempt to circumvent the protections that we put in place. And so we enforce at the front line, but we are also, able to respond quickly when we see trends in scams. So, for example, when we saw an increase in public figure endorsement scams like this, we responded by, rapidly deploying a team targeted at that issue, sharpening our detection tools, and applying a robust misrepresentation policy. And that had real results. So we removed 700,000 accounts as a result, and we saw a 90% drop in the reports of this type of scam. And so I think, what I'm saying is that our responsibility is to ensure that we are strengthening our systems, and we're doing that every day.
And so you mentioned you respond rapidly. So if I clicked on a link like this, let's say, and I made an e-transfer from my bank and we realized it was a scam, and my bank reports it to you, how quickly are you removing this scam? Like if you find out today from Desjardins that there's a scam on your platform, how quickly can you take it down?
So I think it's hard to kind of speak to a hypothetical, but we do respond quickly. I don't have I think what you...
I'll just clarify. So we had Wealthsimple here, and Wealthsimple mentioned something to the effect of it took 4 days for Meta to take down a scam that Wealthsimple had reported. Is there an equivalent time frame for Google?
It really would be context dependent, right? We do work to act rapidly. We've built tools like the Priority Flagger program, for example, so that we can accelerate the review of reports of problematic ads by trusted and credible partners, including, for example, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. And so what that would do is it would bring them to the front of the queue for assessment.
Thank you. And so how is YouTube vetting this? So if there's an RBC ad or a Mark Carney ad or a CBC ad, how are you vetting to make sure that that is CBC or that is the Prime Minister's office or that is RBC? Do you have a process? Because in this case, it failed, or allegedly. I know this has not been proven. So I think what I think of this as a multi-layered, multi-pronged approach, right? So you want to have an kind of at the front door protection system, so like your security system at the front door to prevent bad actors from even entering in the first place. And that's where we use something we call advertiser verification. And we apply an onboarding trust assessment. And what we're trying to do there is to assess the veracity of the actor on our systems, and then triaging them into either a standard or an enhanced verification process. In something like financial services, that is considered a higher risk sector, and so they would go through an enhanced verification process. And in addition to that, we would have our systems working in the back end, constantly analyzing their behavioral signals so that we can understand what the risk profile of this actor is. So there's a whole host of systems that are deployed, including in the onboarding process to ensure that Thank you.
We have the right
running
people.
out of time, so I'll just conclude with saying that it seems to be that each platform has a different system for approving whether it is a legitimate RBC ad or different legitimate PMO ad or whatever it might be. There doesn't seem to be any uniformity. So something we're exploring is perhaps there should be some uniformity required by government regulation, or these are things that we're exploring at this committee. What kind of recommendations we could make? I'll just leave you to comment, respond, and I'm out of time. Thank you.
Sure. I think that we welcome a conversation around things like how do you verify advertisers. I would just offer to this committee that we need to avoid creating a roadmap for actors to circumvent. And that is something that we encounter every day. So that was only to say that there needs to be a portfolio of approaches that are dynamic in nature so that we can have use the power of AI to really test the veracity of the types of content that is entering the ecosystem. But I think this is a conversation that we welcome. There are steps that the Government of Canada can take to enable that, and then there are steps that digital platforms can also take to continue to raise the bar. We see ourselves as a leader in this space. We've been rolling out advertiser verification across 240 countries. We've been doing that proactively, and now over 90% of advertisers on our systems are verified. And so, that's certainly a conversation we welcome.
Okay, thank you, Madame Dancho. Madame O'Rourke, I understand you may be splitting some time with Ms. Begum. I'll leave the two of you to sort that out, but between you, there are 6 minutes, and the floor is yours.
Terrific. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here, Madame Patel. We've heard from a number of witnesses that we need an industrial scale response to these scams, that it's transnational crime, and I can't think of a larger company or one that is more global than Google, which is also actually a verb. You're so big, you're a verb. So you talked about the Global Signals Exchange. You've participated in Operation Maple Disruption. What is missing? So you said we should enable information sharing across ecosystems. The platform should be proactive, community education. We're doing those things. What have you seen around the world that Canada should consider adopting to catch that extra 10% of spam ads or fraudulent ads?
Thank you for the question. It's such a good question. I think even in the question that was posed by Ms. Dancho, one of the things that jumped out to me was how many different pieces of information there are, how many different players there would be in any given scam scenario, right? So Google would have a piece of the puzzle, a financial institution would have another piece of the puzzle, but we're unable to knit together the full picture without having an opportunity to bring that together. And so when people talk about the need for information exchange, it is because if you do not aggregate this data in a way that can be meaningful, you only have noise. And so the Global Signals Exchange is something that we created just over a year ago, so it's still relatively new. But countries like the United Kingdom, countries like Poland are members, and what that has enabled is most recently there's a new case where the UK version of the FBI provided some ingested some content into that system. Google was able to take that and expand on our understanding of the threat landscape with that particular case. Under appropriate lawful authorities, share that back with the UK. As a result, through cross-border collaboration with authorities in West Africa, they were able to take down a major scam operation. So with tens of thousands of accounts associated with this. And so that kind of cross-border collaboration, cross-stakeholder collaboration is essential if we're going to see these types of results. And I think that, so I would encourage Canada to explore joining the Global Signals Exchange. We certainly, want that to be an opportunity for either law enforcement or government to join. And I think there's, I can talk about more areas for partnership and public education, but that's just one example of how it has real results.
So I only have 2 seconds. Is data sovereignty the challenge in participating in something like that? Sort of a yes or no, because I want to cede my time to MP.
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
No.
Thank you so much, MP O'Rourke. Thank you so much to Ms. Patel for being here. It is impressive that Google can remove and block billions of ads before they reach us, and you've just mentioned about the millions that you've suspended, the accounts that were suspended, and I'm quite impressed actually by the number that you have in terms of the success rate, and I know a lot of them are repeat offenders as well in terms of those that try to kind of maneuver the ways they come back to the platform. One of the things I was wondering is are there ways you can kind of protect users from getting targeted by the same suspects who keep coming back? And because that seems to be not part of the way that you have calculated that success rate yet. So kind of eliminating or preventing bad actors from even re-entering. So that would be my first question. And the second I wanted to ask was, because we're limited in time, is what is sort of the most useful step that our government can take to help platforms like yours, help people just from fraud and scams and what's going on right now in the how perverse it's been?
Yes, so thank you for that. I think in terms of preventing reoffenders from, I think of scammers and of fraud on our systems, like they are abusing our systems. They are toxic to the health of the digital economy. And we are very invested in protecting an operational, trusted digital economy. So we are very incentivized to prevent reoffenses. And so when we look at that, the success rate, circumvention of an account termination isn't a violation in and of itself, right? So we do everything that we are able to detect ties to formerly suspended accounts and to kind of understand map the patterns that are kind of perhaps not apparent to the human eye, to say. And so I think that is something that we are doing to understand linkages between accounts or between actors and past accounts. So that is part of our success rate, includes preventing reoffenders in this space. I will, the reality is that like with any kind of criminality, this is a fight without a finish line. We are dealing with sophisticated criminal organizations that constantly adapt, that are, looking for new opportunities to exploit vulnerabilities, to identify new vulnerabilities. And so, we are constantly our commitment is to continuously invest in these systems. In terms of your second part of the question of what steps can you take, in addition to the partnership, which I would really encourage Canada to explore, I think public education is really important. We need Canadians to be equipped with the tools, the training, the resources to be able to identify and avoid scams. A scam is often a journey that they are on. It might not be a single transaction, and so how can we all be partners in helping them recognize when something is off and support them in getting off of that particular track. I'm happy to share how we've done that with a couple of our product designs, but I think that that's something that, having a much broader remit in terms of the resourcing for public education would be super helpful. And I know we're running short on time, but I would also apply that to law enforcement themselves. So resourcing law enforcement to have the capabilities and the training to be able to participate in these types of operations, I think will go a long way and in supporting the efficacy of of what they bring to the table.
Glad that you say that, because we actually have current legislation in play.
I'm afraid we are quite a bit over time, but thank you very much. Monsieur Saint-Marie, c'est à vous 6 minutes, monsieur.
Oui, merci, monsieur le...
Thank you, Chair. Greetings, colleagues. Good morning, Ms. Patel. Thank you for being here. I'll start with a concrete case. 3 weeks ago, my assistant, Jean-André, was watching YouTube and saw an ad with a fake Mark Carney asking him to invest, similar to the collective action that we had a year ago. 1 year later, we are still seeing fake ads. He took a screenshot, sent it to YouTube, and told them that this was a fake ad and asked them to withdraw it. There was no response from YouTube, and the fake ad continued running for days following that. Is this what you're calling being proactive against fake ads?
Merci pour la question et c'est clair.
Thank you for the question. That is clearly a very serious situation. I'll respond in English to be more precise.
I think so. Clearly, I'm not familiar with this particular situation, and it sounds like this is something that we should be exploring, is to understand, exactly what took place. I'm happy to work with your office to understand more clearly. in these cases, we do want to see ads reported, and we have a reporting mechanism for ads that will allow us to understand the ad identifier associated with that so that we can trace it back. When things like this is a public figure endorsement scam, and we absolutely want to be acting rapidly on that. And so, I'm happy to work with your office to understand the situation, how we can be better in responding to that. As I said, this is something that a trend that we've observed in the ecosystem. We have been sharpening our detection tools, but obviously, it sounds to me like this was able to get through, and we want to be able to action that rapidly.
OK, merci, parce que c'est ça, c'est pas juste pour un cas en particulier.
Thank you. That's not just one case, but it's a mechanism generally. We saw it with Meta. Witnesses came here and said they report an ad, and it takes days before any action is taken. A question was put to you, and you said these are hypotheticals. Now, this is a concrete case, and it happens often. You need mechanisms to withdraw or take down these ads immediately. Another question I have for you about YouTube in Canada. What is the percentage of ad revenue on YouTube that comes from fraudulent ads? Do you have that percentage?
So maybe this is actually where the business practices and kind of the way our businesses are built might differ from others. And so I apologize for going into a little bit more detail than you might prefer, but our systems operate when we recognize revenue or generate revenue on an ad. It is generally called a cost per click model, right? So what that means is that a user has to interact with that ad before we are paid for that ad. We're not paid in a pre-impression manner. And so what that means is that when I say that our systems have been able to block 99% of problematic ads before they're ever served to a user, it means we are recognizing zero revenue on those ads. It means that we are not taking money from those fraudsters because we do not want their money. We do not want an ecosystem to be polluted by that type of activity because it undermines our entire mission.
Merci.
Thank you. What you're telling us is that your platforms like YouTube allow fake ads with fake mechanics. Somebody lost $30,000 because of that, and you're saying that you are not even making any money from that. So is it not urgent for you to block all such ads now? The platforms that broadcast those ads on YouTube and on your other platforms, why are they being identified as fake by the Financial Markets Authority in Quebec? Why do they continue appearing on your platforms?
So I think obviously this is a real challenge. It's a shared challenge. I would just say to you that we're on the same side in this challenge. We are partners in tackling this. We have been working very hard to sharpen the detection of these types of scams and to be able to prevent them from abusing our systems. When it comes to things like public figures, for example, on YouTube, we have developed the AI, the likeness tool. And what that would do is it would allow a public figure to basically approve or deny the use of their image in content or in advertisements. And so, this is one of the ways that we built products to be able to respond to the threat. The reality is that we're dealing with criminals who are constantly working to circumvent the protections we're putting in place.
Préciser ma question, s'il vous plaît. Merci pour...
Let me clarify. Thanks for your answer. We have orders issued by the Financial Markets Authority or Consumer Protection Board in Quebec. Are you committing to immediately comply to those withdrawal orders, even without any legal decision?
I'm not familiar with that particular situation, so I'll have to kind of defer, but I'm happy to kind of come back to you once I have a better understanding of the scenario that you're talking about and what authorities are in question.
Si vous pouvez nous rapporter par une question.
you could send us a response in writing. It's a law that entered into force last week that has made that request. So we'd like a written response. Thank you, Chair.
OK, merci, merci, Monsieur Saint-Marie.
Thank you, Mr. Saint-Marie.
I understand you'll be splitting your time with Ms. Borelli. I'll let the two of you sort that out, but between you there are 5 minutes, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and that's correct. Thanks, Ms. Patel, for your testimony here at committee today. And I do have a few questions. Just on a point of clarification, from the time that you become aware of a fraudulent ad or a scam, how long does it take for you to remove that from your sites?
So thank you for the question. I think the answer is it depends. And when you look at the kind of scope and breadth of activity and surfaces that would be, in play for that question, it would really depend on where and when. I think what we do is we act as rapidly as possible, not only to pull down or pull down a problematic piece of content or ad, or to identify a malicious site, for example, but
data that you could provide for us as to the time that you become aware of something till how quickly it's removed from your platforms?
So it really depends on the type of data. I'm happy to kind of explore what we would be able to provide you in that space. But I will just, sorry to kind of just underline, our efforts are to work not only as rapidly as possible, but as effectively as possible. Through the Global Signal Exchange, what we've been able to do is scale that response. So it's not only our systems that are being hardened and protected, but we're able to amplify that globally so that other providers are also able to identify the scam and prevent abuse of their systems.
Banks have, in many cases, taken responsibility when their customers or clients have been defrauded. What level of responsibility has Google taken when your customers have been defrauded because of a scam that's on your platform?
I think so. Listen, like as I've said, there's a very human cost to criminal activity.
Have you ever reimbursed somebody for their losses that they've incurred?
I think this is something where we are very clear on the role that we need to play here in terms of protecting our systems, protecting our users.
That's just a yes or a no. Like, do you ever reimburse any of your clients for their losses that they've incurred because of a scam that's been on your platform?
I think there's just a lot more complexity than.
So it's a no. The answer is no. You don't assume any responsibility. Okay.
Mr. Falk, sorry, just Ms. Patel and Mr. Falk, just 1 sec, because we need to make sure that your mic is on, Ms. Patel. Mr. Falk, I've paused the clock, so not to worry. I'm going to let Mr. Falk repeat that question,
Sure.
and we'll just make sure that your mic is working. Ms. Patel, Mr. Falk, go ahead.
Yeah, Ms. Patel, my question was, so you don't take any responsibility then for losses incurred by customers using your platform for scams on your platform?
We take an incredible amount of responsibility in hardening our
extent
systems
that
and
you
preventing
reimburse
this in the
anybody.
first part. I think there's. I want to go back to, we've recognized the human cost here, and we also recognize that we need to have criminals held accountable for their actions.
Thank you. I need to split my time.
Ms. Patel, a 2026 study looked at 434 loan apps across several countries and found that 141 appeared to violate national regulatory rules, while 147 appeared to violate Google's own policies. After researchers disclosed the findings, Google removed 93 flagged apps from Google Play, representing more than 300 million cumulative installs. If these apps were violating Google's own rules, why were they available on Google Play in the first place? And why did it take outside researchers to identify them? And why aren't all of the 147 apps removed?
Thank you for the question. I think there's a lot to unpack there. So maybe just to kind of speak to how we apply our rules to Google Play. As I said, we review 200 billion apps daily. And what we found, for example, is that 95% of problematic apps are being side-loaded. So, so I think that's just an important stat to understand when it comes to the apps that are exploiting sensitive permissions.
Excuse me. I'm particularly looking at the financial apps asking for highly sensitive information, not harmless games or basic utilities. Why isn't the standard for loan, investment, crypto, banking, and debt relief apps much higher than they ever reached you, much higher before they, like, why aren't you catching them before they even reach the users?
So I think there are high standards for apps to be available on Google Play, and we are assessing whether apps are violative or not on a constant and ongoing basis. In terms of the specifics of why, an outside researcher would have identified one segment of apps that they found to be problematic versus what our assessment led to, I can't speak to that. All I can say is, I think that we are committed to consistently applying our rules across the apps, and it is where we welcome inbound inquiries from external experts. We work with outside experts all the time in this space. So I'm happy to maybe bring some of my colleagues to have a conversation with you about what standards we apply for financial services apps in our Google Play store, because it is something that we take incredibly seriously. I think, I've said this before. This is an ongoing challenge. We are in a very adversarial space where criminals are seeking to circumvent protections. We welcome the conversation because we take it so seriously, but this is not. This is a fight without a finish line. This is something where we are going to have to continuously show up day to day to invest in hardening our systems, and we can only do that in partnership.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Borelli. Mr. Bardizzi, the floor is yours, sir. Again, I looked to my right thinking you'd be sitting there smiling at me, but here you are online. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry I'm not there with you today in person, but I very much appreciate this opportunity. Ms. Patel, I want to start with some questions around the interface between people who have suspicions of seeing fraudulent activity and then the opportunity to have that addressed. Across your products, do you have a customer service standard time of response when there is an advertisement that's flagged as potentially fraudulent? Does it differ across products, or what is that standard?
So I think, if I understand you correctly, your question is with regards to the time to assess a user report of a problematic ad or other type of content?
That's right, and a response to the response and or resolution time.
So I think, as I said earlier, this is something that's really context dependent. And so one of the things to keep in mind when you're thinking about turnaround times for decision making is that having rigid decision making can essentially lead to overblocking of content or essentially penalizing legitimate actors for the behavior of bad actors. And so, when I say that it's context dependent, it's because we do need to apply kind of a rigorous analysis to the policy, like whether something is policy violative or not, and also to understand the behavior of that account. So when I think what have been sharing with the committee is that we are invested in doing that rapidly and to being able to be agile to respond as the threat evolves.
Do you have a customer service standard with respect to when someone can expect to hear back from from a person at Google?
As I said, I think what we look at is how can we do this in a way that is effective, responsive, and essentially is driving to a balanced outcome. I think that what I'm hearing from you is a desire for some sort of bracketing of timeframes. But when we're looking at the evaluation of content and the behaviors that might need to be assessed, having a rigid time frame is not always driving to those outcomes.
No, I understand. I guess I'm speaking more on behalf of those who seek communication back from the company when they have flagged something. I want to pick up on Mr. Falk's questions about reimbursement. Again, it's a similar question. Do you have a customer service standard or a written policy with respect to potential for reimbursement when someone has been defrauded through the links that might be on the platform?
So I think when we talk about this, I want to kind of keep in mind that there are victims here who are deeply harmed, and the perpetrators of that crime should be held accountable for that. And so we are doing what we can to litigate, to freeze their assets, to disrupt the infrastructure behind their operations. But we are also doing everything we can to never even take revenue. But these are, I think we have to, in our mind, just understand where we need to focus on the source of this problem. And the source of this problem are criminal organizations that should be held accountable as opposed to giving perpetrators a free pass.
I understand. And thank you for flagging some of the activities you've done on the. Could you just speak to the role of the Financial Crimes Agency that is being proposed here in Canada, and what kind of relationship you could see Google Canada or Google product lines that have deep penetration into Canada, how this new standing up of the agency could interface with your efforts?
So thank you for the question. I'll have to think about that. I think, for example, is this agency, potentially, should they potentially join the Global Signals Exchange, for example, so that they can benefit from the ingestion and distillation of billions of signals and be able to collaborate with platforms of all kinds to detect and respond rapidly to scams and bring down these criminal organizations. I think this is a space where we'd be very open to collaboration. And happy to kind of continue conversations with Finance Canada around that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Bardisi. OK, Monsieur Saint-Marie, on retourne à vous pour 2 minutes 30 secondes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Patel? If there's any fraud caused by fraudsters and the ads are advertised on your platform, you have a share of responsibility and you have to take up that responsibility. When you look at the mother company, Alphabet, it doesn't publish its revenue by country, but overall, its net income is more than 100 billion US dollars. In Canada, it's 12 billion Canadian dollars. Your net margin is 30%. So we imagine that you're making 4 billion in profits per year thanks to the ads that you sell. After that, you pay almost no tax here because when you take into account the income in tax havens like Bermuda and elsewhere, you contribute to the distribution of these ads by criminal organizations that cause citizens to lose a lot of money, as the case we read about in the press, the lady who lost $30,000. Do you feel that you're great corporate citizens here in Canada?
I would just note I lost the last part of the question.
Est-ce que vous considérez...
Do you consider yourselves great corporate citizens here in Canada?
Thank you for the opportunity to respond to that. Absolutely, I do. I think that the leadership that Google is showing here goes well above and beyond what we see first of all, in co-founding the Global Signals Exchange so that we can have real results, tackling the source of the problem, using our resources to litigate proactively and bring down, disrupt the infrastructure of sophisticated criminal organizations, building products and entire business models that rely and reinforce on a healthy, trusted digital ecosystem where we are applying layers of protections and strengthening our products to be able to be safe by design. everything I spoke to earlier, billions of devices being protected, billions of problematic, attempts by criminals to victimize Canadians being blocked. I think that, we are all in an environment where we are dealing with an incredible challenge. And to say that, that we're going to be able to prevent trespassers from ever accessing systems is, something that we work every day to achieve that level of perfection. And it requires incredible investment and dedication and teams that are not only doing this for our products, but are sharing that freely with other platforms around the world so that they can benefit from our investments in this. So absolutely, I am incredibly proud of this. And I think that when you look at the source of this problem, I want us to be very clear that I find it, as someone who we have all lived, we all know someone who has been victimized in this regard. And, we're here to show up as a partner in this fight, to say that our systems, we do not want to be abused, that we are doing everything in our power to constantly improve the safeguards applied. And we want to work in partnership so that the source of this problem is tackled.
My time is up, but I started my first intervention. My assistant reported fake ad, no action, no acknowledgement of receipt, no action, and this continued for a few days. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Saint-Marie.
Thank you, Mr. Saint-Marie.
For 5 minutes.
Mr. Gugelmin, my apologies.
Oh, okay. Mr. Googly, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witness for being here today. So Google has said that Gemini is used to detect and block scam ads in real time. So it reads behavioral patterns, what was the other one, account age and campaign patterns. Can you walk us through what that actually looks like in practice? Like, at what point does Gemini actually intervene?
So thank you for the question. It's a great question that probably requires a subject matter expert. And that's something that I'd be happy to kind of connect offline and have a deeper dive with our subject matter experts on this. But in sum, this would be continuous analysis running in the background on these on types of behavioral cues. So when I talked about, for example, our onboarding process, right? So when we take on a new advertiser and we're doing a trust assessment, we have our advertiser verification process, right? And then we have something called limited ad serving. And I want to get to the point here is that scam networks rely on three things. They rely on speed, volume, and deception. And so we've built our systems to be economically unattractive to scammers so that we are too slow, too limited in reach, and apply too much transparency for it to be worth their time. So in the first place, we have the advertiser verification process. Then we have limited ad reach. And what that does is it throttles their ability to reach users because a scammer is casting a wide net. They want to reach millions of people in the hopes that a handful might fall for that deception. And then we apply the transparency rules of your ad center being able to see who is that advertiser, where are they located. So I think, kind of going back to this is where that limited ad serving, in the background, Gemini will be assessing all of the kind of behavioral patterns to understand if this actor is trustworthy or if there are, like, for example...
I'm going to interrupt here.
Sorry.
So I want to bring up Gemini since, we're on the subject here because recently you guys launched a lawsuit for the Outsider Enterprise case. And for people who don't know, who might be listening at home, a foreign criminal cyber network used Gemini to create phishing links, websites. They sent out some 2.5 million fraudulent text messages, made 9,000 websites, were able to scam people. Now, is Gemini able to keep pace with that kind of abuse, or do you see a gap emerging between how professional scammers and fraudsters and foreign actors can use tools like Gemini in a way to scam people where you actually can't use Gemini to protect them at the exact same speed?
So it is a constant challenge. We see the power of AI for defenders, and we apply it every day. So I think, we see this as kind of a two-sided coin. So AI must be used for defense. It is kind of how we're able to tackle the scale and complexity of this challenge and the dynamic nature of it. But yes, obviously, malicious actors are weaponizing. What's so sad is that technology that can be used to, hopefully cure cancer, to improve diagnoses and all of these incredible societal benefits, and it's being misused by these actors. But I do think that this is one where you're in a bit of an arms race, right? And so our company is focused on how do we, strengthen the protections, and going after some, like the actors who abuse our tools is one of the tactics that I think is pretty novel in
Would you say that you're playing catch up though? Like the people who are using the tools are able to sort of outpace you, and then you're having to play catch up just by way the technology currently works?
I don't know if I would characterize it that way. I think, but I do think it is a constant space of innovation, right? And so it is something that we have to be very dedicated and diligent about tackling.
In this particular case, there were hundreds of thousands of Americans that were affected. Were any Canadians affected by this?
I'm not familiar with that. I'd have to. I can see if that information is available.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Guglielmin. Mr. Ma, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Patel. Earlier, you talked about proactive in educating the public. Can you be specific in terms of what the Google's plan is? And in that regard, how much is Google spending in educating the public?
So thank you for the question. This is actually a space where we would really welcome working in partnership with members of this committee and really any member of Parliament to help support education of their citizens. I'm going to speak about two things. One is our work with the Canadian Anti-Scam Coalition to support their efforts to amplify education resources for the Canadian public. The other is, actually, maybe I'll say three things. We're actually working on some workshops targeting, literacy tools for retirees. Those we're hoping to roll out over the course of the second half of this year. Please feel free to reach out. But also something called Be Scam Ready. And what this was, it was actually, the reason I point to it is because it was developed in part through our teams in Toronto. And it gamifies the kind of learning journey, and it's also a learning by doing. So when Ms. Begum was talking about, what steps can the government do, one of the things we've observed in public education is it's, instead of just a broadcast out, like a broad message diffused and hope that people read and understand, it's that how do you have the learning by doing? And so Be Scam Ready is something that, could be put in any of your householders. We're happy to share it with you. And it equips Canadians and users around the world with some of those critical skills to be able to identify scams when they're happening and give them that moment of pause and reflection so that scammers that relied on speed and pressure no longer have that tool at their disposal. This is something that, I don't have like a specific dollar figure to share with you, but it is something we invest in every year. We are looking to do more of that in Canada and happy to work with all of you on that.
So the second part of my original question, how much is Google spending on this?
So that's where I was saying I don't have like a dollar figure available on that. It's
able estimate or percentage of your revenue?
Unfortunately not on the spot. No, but it's also pretty dynamic, right? We look for opportunities. It's not only a spend thing, right? It's how do you build products and tools that can equip the public. It's not just, workshops. It's also I don't know if you've ever had, if you have an Android phone, we have now a tool that will warn users real time that a phone call displays a suspicious pattern and it might be a scam. So we're doing this in a whole multiplicity of different ways. So the investment really kind of spans quite a number of actions.
So without a target, then how do you know you've spent enough in this regard?
Well, I think this is, like I said, when you look at, this is an issue where we always have to do more, right? And so we bring our A game to this every single day. We're committed to showing up every day and investing in our products, in our partners, and in the public. And so I don't think there's a floor or a ceiling. This is just something where we have to strive to work together to tackle this challenge.
Okay. So we all know fraudulent advertisers often attempt to purchase visibility through the same advertising system used by legitimate businesses. How does Google ensure that commercial incentives never override consumer protection considerations in enforcing decisions?
I think, thank you for that. I think it goes back to how we look at the digital ecosystem. I don't know if any of you answer phone calls from phone numbers that you don't recognize anymore. It's a whole generation of people who no longer pick up the phone because trust was broken. And so our incentive here is to preserve trust in the digital ecosystem. That's how we look at it. That's why we've built our business model so that, and our enforcement mechanisms, so that we are not making profit off of this, so that we are able to block these ads before they're ever seen by users, and that doesn't enter our ecosystem, and to make it as unattractive as possible for scammers to even come to Google in the first place, and they'll go look elsewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ma. Colleagues, I'm going to take a couple of moments here to ask a few questions, and then we're going to go quickly to Mr. Saint-Marie, the CPC, and the Liberals for one more. Ms. Patel, I want to pick up on something you just said in response to Mr. Ma as well as to Mr. Falk earlier. I understand you're saying that in most instances, I believe you said 99% of cases, you are blocking fraudulent activity from occurring. Let's put that aside for a moment. When it does occur, as, for example, it did in this instance of the Prime Minister being put forward through a deep fake, somebody falling victim to that. Did you earn money on that ad?
So what you're asking...
Okay, just one second. Okay, you're good to go, Ms. Patel.
Okay. So I think you're asking about a specific ad, and so I'm not really in a position to...
So let me then not be specific about that ad. If an ad is proven after the fact, okay, so it's uploaded onto YouTube, somebody falls victim to whatever the fraud is. Fast forward a month, $30,000 has been lost on the part of that individual by virtue of that fraud. YouTube is made aware, it's proven that that was a fraudulent ad that was used on your platform. You would have been paid, YouTube, for the advertisement. Do you keep that money? Do you return that money to the individual who was the victim of the fraud? Do you use that money for your legal fees? Do you collect that money? Help us understand what happens there.
I think, so actually, this is a really important question because I think it speaks to maybe some parallel paths that seem to be conflated here. One is what is policy violative, and one is what is criminal activity. So our role as a non-state actor, we are not law enforcement, is to assess content, including ads, for whether they are policy violative. We cannot make a finding on whether they are fraudulent. That is the role of law enforcement.
I understand.
And so we operate at different paces, right? So when we're made aware of a problem, an ad that is policy violating, perhaps it violates our misrepresentation policy, we can act rapidly to pull that down and terminate the account.
Yes, but Ms. Patel, let me be clear. You and I are talking about two different things, so I'm going to try to be clearer here. You haven't, in this situation, pulled it down. Someone has fallen victim to an ad that YouTube, for whatever reason, has failed to remove from its site. Would you have collected revenue during the period in which that ad was up?
It really depends on, like, I don't have a good answer for you on how what the revenue kind of model would have been for a specific
I thought your
ad.
revenue model was that if an ad is up, you make money off it. Because you said a few moments ago you don't make money off it until somebody engages. So what I'm saying is once somebody has engaged, and it's proven that the engagement was with a fraudulent ad, would you have collected revenue?
I think what I'm trying to say is that if it's proven that it was fraudulent, is something that will, in my experience, come much longer down the road of a criminal case than whether we've been able to take action on something that was policy violative.
I understand. Once it's been proven that it's criminal, what do you do with the money you raised?
I think that is something that I would have to kind of come back to you on. I don't think, keep in mind that
So in other words, you just sort of interrupt Ms. Patel. So you can't say unequivocally that YouTube does not keep the money. Just right now, from where you stand, you cannot say unequivocally that YouTube does not keep the money that it might have earned off of a fraudulent ad in which someone was victimized.
I'm pretty confident that we're not recognizing revenue from that activity.
What makes you so confident?
I think that's something that where we would we'd have no incentive to take that money.
I understand. You would have earned the money already on the ad is the point I'm making. We'll come back to this, Ms. Patel. I think you understand where we're going with this. A couple of more questions really quickly. You mentioned that you've got some technology available to you in terms of providing an opportunity for public officials, for example, to remove a deep fake. So you talked about safe by design. The ad that Monsieur Saint-Marie and Ms. Dancho at the beginning talked about was Prime Minister Carney, correct?
Right.
Did YouTube send correspondence to the Prime Minister to verify whether or not that was in fact him in this particular fraud in question?
So I can't speak to this particular situation. What I would say is,
but your policy by design should have, if I understand your policy correctly. Is that right?
So what we've created is something called the likeness ID, and it is open to public figures to enroll. So it's not so much something that we would necessarily proactively ask the Prime Minister to enroll, but we'd offer the opportunity for that for any a public figure to use the likeness ID feature. And so I think there's just a sequencing shift here in terms of how that would work. But in cases where we have a public figure endorsement scam and we're made aware of that, our first action is to obviously remove that and then to terminate the account.
Did you inform the Prime Minister's office in this instance of this particular scam?
So again, you're asking about a very specific scenario, and so.
Well, but I mean, I understand it's a specific scenario. We're talking about a deep fake involving the Prime Minister of Canada, encouraging Canadians to invest fraudulently using a platform that you own and operate that led to the defrauding of $30,000 of an individual. It's a pretty specific, high-profile case. What I'm trying to get at, and if I understand correctly what you're saying, Ms. Patel, you're saying that Google and YouTube do not, in the way that your policy is currently designed, believe that it is your responsibility to reach out to the person who is being impersonated, and that is therefore leading to the potential victimization of a Canadian. What you're saying is that it is the onus on the public official to first enroll in a program that you offer, and then, at that point, they would be able to engage with you. Do I understand that correctly?
No, I'm sorry if that's the impression that I left. That I think I'm talking about two different things here. So when we have a policy violative, and let's be clear, I think the Prime Minister's office is very aware of the public figure, like of the endorsement scams that are underway. And so that is something where when they become aware of one that they need to flag to us, that happens, and we appreciate, kind of being able to do a rapid response. But I would say we are working to block those from ever coming onto our system. What I'm talking about in terms of the likeness ID is something that's much broader than just ads. It's actually something that, could be available through YouTube. And so it's just something that stands on its own, as opposed to, is interacting with a specific piece of content. And that's where I'm saying, that's something that we would offer enrollment for public figures if that's something that they'd like to access.
Thank you. My final question, returning back to one other thing I asked previously, is this. You've said that you're not sure if YouTube or Google has reimbursed somebody that has been the victim of a fraud that occurred on your platform, or you're not sure whether or not YouTube or Google has collected revenue off of an ad that has, after the fact, been determined to be fraudulent. I understand that correctly? You're not sure?
I think there's a lot of mechanics
but
that are part of that mean that I'm not able to give you a yes or no answer that I think you're looking for.
So here's my follow-up. Do you think they should?
I think that we have to do everything in our power to be.
It's not about power, though. To me, it's about morality and justice. So I'm just asking: do you think that YouTube and Google should? Whether you do now or not, and whether you do now or not, I can appreciate that you're not sure here today. What I'm asking as Google's representative here in Canada before us on the company's behalf at a parliamentary committee, do you think you should?
I think that we should be having no business with fraudulent scammers, right? That's what we work to do every day.
Yeah, but clearly you do. So it's disappointing, I think, just to me, Ms. Patel. It's very, very similar answer to what we heard from Meta when they were here a couple of weeks ago, and I suspect I speak on behalf of most members of the committee that we would hope the answer to that would be yes. I'm going to pass the floor to Monsieur Saint-Marie for a couple of minutes very quickly to ask one more question, and then it will go to the Conservative side, the Liberals for one more, and then we'll wrap up.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Well, Simple came here and told us that in other jurisdictions, some laws oblige platforms like YouTube to verify the identity of those who buy ads when these are financial ads being advertised. So verify the IDs to make sure that these are not fraudsters and that they are from recognized institutions. Why don't you do that here? That will simplify lots of issues, would avoid fraud. Verify the identity of those purchasing ads to make sure that they are not criminals before those ads are broadcast on your platforms. Why don't you do this?
So thank you. And in fact, we do that. And I think what we're dealing with, so we do that in a number of different ways. So we have advertiser verification for onboarding. We also have additional enhanced verification obligations for sensitive, higher risk sectors, including financial services sectors, which would, for example, make sure that that we're checking their licenses and elements like that. When it comes, on Google, we don't allow most crypto ads, for example, but in the limited areas where we would, like a crypto exchange, we require registration with FinTrack. So these are steps that we endorse, that we take, that we do proactively. We don't do this because we're legally obligated to. As I said, we've been rolling this out across 240 countries. I would also point out that, we need to do this in a way that is a portfolio approach. And the reason I say that is that, identification documents are one element, one way of demonstrating you are who you say you
Ouais,
are.
mais c'est ça,
But-
je vais. Merci pour la réponse.
Thank you for the answer. My question was, a financial ad is not simply checking into the identity of the person. You need to find out if this is an institution recognized by the authorities in this country. Then they can publish the ad. If it's an individual, they should be blocked simply and only allow real institutions registered with financial authorities. They are the only ones who should publish ads, because you are saying, yes, you can look at the driver's license and so on. That is not sufficient. Can you commit to do more to block financial ads?
This is an area where I think what you're talking about is financial services verification. And this is an area where we, hope to work with the Government of Canada, because there are some steps that need to be taken in order to enable that, that are specific to Canada, that don't apply in other jurisdictions. So, this is something that we do in Australia, for example. I'm sure you've heard that. In Canada, there is shared jurisdiction here when it comes to financial services. And so that is the space where we look for the federal government to play a role, because what we would need to work together to create is essentially a mandated registry that is a single registry that is machine readable, that has certain parameters where the registry is requiring certain identifiers, is acting as a clearinghouse to validate these financial services providers, and then that is something that our systems can interact with. So there are a few steps that need to be taken here in Canada before that's actually available for us. But it's certainly a conversation that we've had with Finance Canada that we look forward to continuing to have. It's a conversation we welcome.
Merci beaucoup. Merci, Monsieur Saint-Marie. Madame Dancho.
Thank you, Ms. Patel. Again, we appreciate you answering many of our questions, and I think we're all a bit frustrated with some of the answers, but I appreciate the efforts you're putting in here today. We recognize that Google, across many of your platforms, are doing a lot and taking new measures every day to combat this evolving issue. We recognize the hard work that's being put in, but of course you also have a financial interest to do so. It's not necessarily from benevolence. It's important that people trust Google's platform, and therefore it's important that you combat frauds and scams, and most people in the Western world use your services. It's ubiquitous to use Google, Gmail, YouTube. We use them every day. You have billions of users. And so I guess what we're trying to determine, and we recognize what you're saying, there's a role for governments to combat the fraud in the first place. There's a role for banks and Interact and payment rails to stop the flow of the money. And there's a role for people to become educated and stop themselves from clicking on scams. We recognize there's multifaceted, but to be clear, what we've heard from many tech companies, yourselves included, that there is not a dedicated percentage of your revenue for education. You do not have a dedicated customer service standard to respond or to remove frauds. You have billions of daily users. You're one of the largest companies to ever exist in history. You have hundreds of billions of dollars of annual revenue. And so I think the sense that we're getting from what we've heard today and from other tech companies' testimony is that you may be doing a lot, but you're not doing enough. And there may be a role that we will recommend to government, that there be some requirements on tech companies, whether that's a customer service standard, whether that's something like a dedicated amount of your budget that goes to education, whether you should be held accountable financially for reimbursing people that use your platform and click on something that you've permitted on YouTube that loses them $31,000. So these are questions that we're wrestling with. There are some things that we will discuss potentially recommending to government. But again, as one of the largest and most profitable companies to ever exist, it's difficult for us to hear when our constituents are losing tens of thousands of dollars because of things that you're allowing on your platform that is misleading them, that looks very convincing. It's difficult for us to accept that you're doing everything that you can given your vast resources. So it's a bit disappointing to hear some of the lack of concrete action in terms of reimbursement, customer service standards, dedicated budgets for education. But we appreciate that you've been here today, and I'll allow you to have the last word. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, listen, this is a situation that has human cost. We take it incredibly seriously. Everything that we are doing across our products, our partnerships, and our public education is our goal is to disrupt the business model of scammers, not to reinvent it. And so I think when we look at how incentive structures are created in legislation, we want to look at how do you incentivize information sharing across actors? How do we ensure that policies like competition and privacy don't prevent that or penalize that kind of information sharing? We want to incentivize that the public awareness. We do want to incentivize standards like having a basic understanding of the advertisers on your systems, and to do that in a smart way for this AI era. So there are steps that governments can play to create an incentive structure to have industry players held to a high standard while not shifting liability from perpetrators and resources, quite honestly. We are dedicating an incredible amount of time and energy and resources to prevent this type of action. I believe that Google is a leader in this space, and I just wanted to say we are on the same side in this debate and in this fight. It is a fight, and so I think that is the kind of energy and the commitment that we bring to it.
Thank you very much for your testimony today.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Patel, appreciate you being here. We're going to move on to a couple of other things, so you are welcome to go. We appreciate you being here to share some insight with us. Thank you very much. Colleagues, I'm going to give the floor to Madame O'Rourke on something quickly, and then we've got just a couple of quick minutes to wrap up here. Madame O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to move the following motion, which was put on notice last Friday for mid-sized business growth and retention. Would you like me to read it in its entirety?
I don't think it's necessary, Madame O'Rourke. But we just looking to see if there's any members that wish to speak to this motion that was put on notice on Friday, June the 12th. Madam Clerk, I'm going to need you because we're going to have a vote here.
I can respond just briefly.
Sure. Madame Dantra, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Clerk, and Madam O'Rourke. I really appreciate this motion very much. I appreciate the thought that went into it, and certainly I think, and I appreciate that part of it, from my understanding, was inspired by our productivity study earlier this year that we all worked together on. And I do feel it was a thoughtful motion looking to fill some gaps. And I also appreciate any motion that's looking to review government spending for in the way that you've put it and in the way that we've put past motions. So we do support this, and we appreciate that you've brought it forward.
Okay, seeing no further speakers. Excuse, Mr. Saint-Marie. Oui, allez-y.
Oui.
Very quickly, very important and interesting topic. In the future, it would be nice for us to have a subcommittee meeting or an informal meeting to plan any future sessions, but I totally support this motion.
I'm going to consider this motion adopted. Colleagues, just before we end, a couple of things. I want to first and foremost thank all of the House administration, our interpreters, our analysts, those that help support the function of committee every week for being here to support us. We know it's not always easy. And the same goes too as well to political staff from all parties. We very much appreciate the dedication that you have to the service of the country. And often you're doing very difficult work behind the scenes, and although there's not always agreement on how we get to things, we appreciate the work that you do, so merci. The last thing I wanted to, or two last things. The other is just this committee has been unusually collaborative. Not all committees work this way, and I want to take a moment to thank and congratulate members from all parties for the way in which they have collaborated with one another, not always easily, not always getting to where an individual may want us to get, but nonetheless in the spirit of trying to advance the interests of the business before us. So I do want to take the opportunity to thank you for that. The very final thing is this. It is our wonderful clerk's last day with us here at the Industry Committee. And I am going to offer Raquel and Gabrielle and Kareem, if they want, just a quick couple of seconds to express their gratitude, but I want to express mine. The clerk plays a critical role in the function of Parliament, particularly in regards to committee. Miriam, you have been gracious, kind, thoughtful, and most importantly, helpful in the work that we do. So I want to, on behalf of all of us as the chair of this committee, thank you so much for everything that you have done. And I'm going to give Raquel the opportunity to express that as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Madam Clerk, a very heartfelt thank you for your dedication to serving the Canadian public in such a critical role, a fellow Manitoban. And we've shared many kind words. And as you reminded me today, my very first committee that I ever chaired, you were there beside me, and I remember feeling quite terrified. And you were just the port in the storm for me, and a guiding hand of wisdom. And I greatly appreciate everything that you've done for this committee and in your 35-year career. And we are very lucky in Canada that we have exceptional public servants like yourself. But among them, you are certainly among the best. So thank you for your leadership in this country, on this committee, and teaching us what it really means to serve the public in a professional way to the highest standard. So thank you very much.
Monsieur Saint-Marie.
Oui, Madame Burke.
Ms. Burke, it's a pleasure to work for you. Thank you very much for all you did. I wish you well in the future. It's deserved. I've worked with many clerks over the past few years, and as Raquel just said, you are no doubt one of the most experienced. What I appreciate with you is that even when there's a lot of pressure, even when the situation is complicated, when we need to react fast, you're always smiling. You're always very cool. Everything appears to be simple, and you really do everything possible to reassure us. It's a delight to work with you. For the Francophone that I am, you've always called out to me, spoken to me in impeccable French. That is also much appreciated. Thank you very much for everything, and I wish you the best.
Okay. Mr. Bardisi, I'm going to give you the last word for a very quick thank you.
Yeah. Et je vais juste poursuivre le fil de.
I will continue what Mr. Saint-Marie started. Come back to her calm, her spirit. She seems to always be in control, even it's not always the case in our caucus.
I think proceeded with your help to have the kind of overall relationship also led by our fantastic chair who has helped us have a very collaborative, I think, overall set of proceedings. And we know that behind the scenes that you keep things under control and going in all kinds of ways. We had so many different studies going at once, and you kept all the plates spinning in a very, very effective way that helped us do our work very well. So thanks for your leadership in this committee, both in the procedural and technical sense, but also in the ways you support us to do our best work. So thank you so much.
Okay, so we'll give a round of applause and. And with that, before I adjourn for what I hope will be the final time until September, Miriam, I will turn to you to say whatever you might want to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks to all of you. You got me all emotional. I had prepared a rebuttal, but not necessary, clearly. Very grateful for all of you and the work that you do and the commitment that you have to bettering Canada. So, and it's been an honor to support you in that work.
So, probably shouldn't be presenting alcohol on a public meeting space, but I'm doing it anyway. On behalf of Raquel, Kareem, Gabrielle, myself, and everyone, we want to present you with a bottle of the Speaker Scotch, so that Parliament is never far. And we wish you all the best and a wonderful summer. And with that, colleagues, that same sentiment to all of you. Meeting adjourned.